Good afternoon. Are you guys hearing me? Just testing the mic again.
Yes, hearing you loud and clear.
Awesome, awesome. All right, so again, good afternoon. Welcome to the Gomex TVET webinar series. My name is Shakim Bernard. So I'll just be the little moderator for today. I'm sure you guys would have seen the flyers or the posters or even a video just talking about what we're going to cover today.
Is not up to a single individual to manage quality within the organization, but it is indeed a culture where quality is a part of the operation of the institution. And number two, we allocate responsibility to team members because in creating a culture of quality assurance, there must be some way of allocating responsibility, checking for plagiarism, fraud, and malpractice with our teaching learning processes is very important as well. Coaching and mentoring others and completing our professional development activities can be deemed a non-conformance, and that must be done as well. Or quality assurance records. These are documents that are necessary to be kept for audit purposes. We need to ensure that we do that as well. Now, we can also do this by creating a bank of assessment questions and the exemplar answers. This prevents the rushing of assessment instrument, and it allows them to be done in a timely manner so that they can be correctly managed. Now we create and update policies and procedures as we go to ensure that we are in compliance. And a lot of institutions get into issues at number 8 because you may have made a change to the policy, but that change was not replicated across the institution. And what that does is to create one department using Form 10 and another one using Form 10A. That indeed creates an issue. Now, dealing with appeals, complaints, and disputes is very important in the preventative action. And we design and update our quality documents and templates as is necessary. It is also crucial that staff be inducted correctly to ensure that they are aware of what are the issues or what are their roles that they have to play. And this is a short list. The list could go on and on, but I didn't want to read a list to you ad nauseum. Now, non-conformance management. So we did our little background discussion on what is non-conformance. We are aware that non-conformance is a failure to meet a requirement, which could be regulatory, it could be statutory, it could be part of an accreditation standard. Wherever it comes from, a non-conformance needs to be addressed. Now, non-conformance comes in two major categories. One is called a major non-conformance, meaning that this single non-conformance has the ability to create mayhem for us, right? It can break our system down. Minor non-conformance is a one-off mistake. However, if there is a series of one-off mistakes, then they can be deemed a major non-conformance because a series of mistakes is indicating that there's a lack of training, a lack of monitoring, or it could also be a culture of slackness, right? So that's why it becomes a major non-conformance. Now, when we have non-conformances, we conduct our audits. We get an audit report. Some satisfactory, there are some observation made, and there are some non-conformances found. Where do we go from there? This is always a challenge. Now, when we have a challenge like this with non-conformances, the first thing I always say we do is to PCDA. We plan, do, check, and then we act. Very important that we get management commitment to identify and assess the issues that was raised in the report. Then our plan of action is where we do. And after we have done what we set out, then we check to see if they're working. and then we act upon whatever needs to be acted upon. And acting mean we may plan, do, and check again, right? So plan, do, check, act is what is what is used commonly for quality assurance. Now, team meeting is very important. I always say once there's a report, once there's an audit report, if I'm an auditor and doing a follow-up meeting or doing a verification audit, I always look to see, did you have a team meeting to discuss the issue? Because we talked about number one earlier, for those who are just joining us, we talked about building a culture of quality assurance as a way of managing non-conformance in TVET. So we have to build that culture of quality, and in building that, team members must be involved. So quality is not a my issue, it's not a registry issue, it's not a manager issue, it is our issue, it's our culture, right? And so having that productive team meeting, a meeting where the minutes of this meeting is available for our own review and our audit is very important. So team meeting is the number one step in dealing with non-conformances. Once we have done that, we need to develop what is called a corrective action procedure, where the institution, you know when an institution takes non-conformances serious, when there exists a strategic method to deal with it. So I'm going to show you an example of what I can't show anybody else's documents, so I can show mine. This is a procedure for corrective action. What it does, it tells you how the institution handles corrective action. And it tells who's responsible for what. And you can see the procedure, right? That it may come from the following. It could come from a customer complaint. It could come from employee reports of problem with equipment, procedures, processes. Employees could also suggest. Now, a culture of quality assurance allows the employees to make suggestion. It could be a trend with a product non-conformity. It could be audit findings, and it could be management review. So wherever it comes from, we have a procedure in which it can be handled, and it gives you the step. Step one tells how these things should be done, right? And it tells you that you need to tell the source, all of these things, where they're from, and you need to indicate a priority. This is why it needs a group meeting, a group discussion. So when an institution doesn't have a corrective action procedure, it means that corrective actions are not institutionalized and they're not personalized. Once you personalize corrective action, it creates opportunity for blame game, right? So I say the first procedure in creating a quality assured culture and dealing with non-conformance is to have our group meetings. Secondly, there needs to be a procedure in how you handle non-conformances. So whenever there's a report that comes from the accrediting body, it gives us the opportunity to activate our procedure and know who will do what, who will go where, and carry on for that. All right. So that's pretty much is our corrective action procedure, which is necessary. It could be a challenge as well, because this needs to be a part of the quality management system. If we don't have a procedure as a part of the management system, it's difficult to hold anyone accountable for non-conformances. Now, the next thing we have is employees must have a way of documenting and reporting non-conformances when they are discovered. And that leads into having a non-conformance action request form. As you can see here, it tells you whether the action is a corrective action, it's a preventative action, it is an opportunity to improve the current system. It gives you what's the source of this. Did a student complain? Did an assessor raise an issue? Did an issue come from training? Is there some sort of internal audit report that brought this to your attention? And we can also put a reference number For us, we just say NCTVET and we put the year and date and we know where it came from. Then when we're done with that, we get here, we give a brief discussion on what was the non-conformance. The person who initiated it will also put their signature there. Then we assign it to someone. Notice that employees get involved now. So when we have non-conformances, we manage them, right? So when we put someone, it's assigned to someone and they need to reply by a specific date. They will then do their root cause analysis. What caused this non-conformance in the institution or in the workplace? Once that is done, they will outline a set of actions that need to be taken. And when that is outlined, they will sign that. So the employees get involved, team members get involved. Now, who is the assigned person? The person that did the analysis, maybe the registrar, did the analysis of the issue and assign it to an AMO or a data entry or someone to correct. Whoever it is assigned to correct has a responsibility now to sign that they have corrected it. And then someone will verify that it is corrected. And in verifying that it is corrected, they will have, is it effective, the solution that was given? Is it not effective? And what evidence do we have to show that this thing has been corrected and it is now closed out by the quality assurance person or the person in charge of quality assurance? So that is the awesome lot to think about. A procedure. So let's backtrack a little. Number one in dealing with non-conformances is to ensure that we have our team meeting. Step two, we must have a procedure to handle non-conformance. And thirdly, there must be a traceable document that can show what do you do when you have a non-conformance, okay? It tracks it from start to finish, and there are many templates out there that can be used, but I try to capture as much as we can on this specific form. Now, when we're finished with this, we're not just saying go ahead and do corrective action plan and do an action form. We want to see now, how are we doing? So we track over time to see the maturity of our system. Now, in doing so, we have what's now called the Corrective Action Law. And so you can see an example here that says this was submitted on the 9th of April. You can see that the type is either corrective or it is preventative or it's an opportunity to improve. The source, you can see that this came from an external audit report, right? Which process was it impacting? It was impacting on the assessment process, right? You could see that it was assigned to an employee to correct. And you can see whether there was a document procedure was not matching what was in the learner handbook. So let's look at number one in this. And then as you go over, it gives you other information about it, that it is assigned to someone, the date is assigned, the day the action should come, it is stating that it is overdue, and you can see when the action was completed and if follow-up is necessary. So what we're looking at and what you're seeing is our ability to manage non-conformances and showcase a maturity of the non-conformance management. Now, when that is done, we're not just concerned as an institution or in a TVET system, oh, the audit reports are coming. What are we doing with them? When it is finished, we have a reporting section that we can see how we're doing. You can get to see how many cars were filed in the last 36 months. How are we doing them? What's taking so long to resolve these issues? And this is demonstrating a sort of a culture. It gives you a breakdown by type. So you see that most of the issues that comes across this specific system is corrective actions, right? And you could look at this and say that, but the institution is reactive. Because if everything being corrected is coming from an external audit report, it demonstrates a culture of reactiveness. But if you were looking at this and you start seeing preventative, once your percentage of preventative action is greater than corrective, you realize the institution is now mature and is able to correct itself. And you can see the history of everything over here, and you can see what process in the institution is more likely to create what kind of an issue. And we can see a whole lot more from a template like this that gives you information that you can use to make strategic decision in how you handle non-conformances in the future. Once we have done that, there's something we need to be aware of as well, what is called an opportunity for improvement. An opportunity for improvement means that it is not a violation of the policies or procedures, but we are systematically looking back and saying, how can we make learning better for our students? How can we improve the lesson plan template? How can we improve the request for assessment template? Where are the problems we're having? So the institution become inward looking for corrective action than to await the arrival of an auditor to tell you what you are doing incorrectly and what you're doing correctly. Now, annually, if you have a management system, there has to be at least an annual management review meeting. Now, a management review meeting is a review meeting where the report, like we saw just now, is tabled at that meeting. What is the trend that's happening at the institution this year? How are we managing? Can we make an out of the management review meeting? Let me give you an example. We used to trend a lot with information in the policy manual not matching what is in the student handbook, and it become a regular non-conformance. And after careful analysis, you discovered that students are not taking the paper book anymore. And if they're going into our learning management system, then we could upload our policies to our learning management system and then modify our 5.1 and 6.1 to say that the policies of the institution, they're communicated to students at orientation, they're on the website available, and they're also available in the learning management system. Since we have done that 2 years ago, we no longer have that non-conformance trending because it's difficult to maintain what's in your manual and what is in the student handbook. That is always going to be an issue for us. We've had issue where students would not pay their school fee, but they were able to obtain certificates because it was 2 different processes. We went back and we modified the request for assessment to ensure that the request for assessment has financial clearance on it. And so once the bursar signs off or the accountant signs off on the request for assessment, you won't have that challenge again. And these are stuff that they don't come in an audit report, they come by looking at your system. So I'm not presenting to you a perfect system, but a culture of, looking back at things, analyzing things, and moving forward is what is necessary to manage quality assurance in TVET. So I hope that through this presentation, you would have encountered what is a non-conformance, which is a failure to meet requirement. We went over major non-conformance, capable of creating problem for us, break down our system. We could lose our accreditations to that. We looked at a minor non-conformance, which is a simple mistake, a one-off mistake. But we also note that if a one-off mistake is consistent enough, it could become a major non-conformance. Now, one of the issues we have locally and with audit reports is when you give me a non-conformance, I have to look at it carefully. because if my policy didn't say I was doing that, it is therefore not a non-conformance. A non-conformance is failing to meet your policy or an accreditation standard. If it is something new that could improve the system, that should not be listed as a non-conformance. It is an opportunity for improvement. So oftentimes in our TVET system, we get in a lot of issues where we are not doing the thing incorrectly. However, it may be believed that we should do it another way. That, ladies and gentlemen, is called an opportunity for improvement and not necessarily a non-conformance. Because if the policy says 1, 2, 3, and that policy was approved with 1, 2, 3, asking me to put number 4 in it is not a non-conformance. And I don't accept those findings as non-conformance, because non-conformance means that I am failing to follow a procedure. Now, if the procedure doesn't exist, I can't fail to follow it. If it is a necessary one, due to the changes now, like we're now doing e-assessments, we're doing assessments online, there may be security requirements for assessment now. In our original policies and procedures, we did not say, or we couldn't say that we're going to put passwords on exams. Now, if you're going to write someone up for that, the finding will have to be that the exam process can be improved by adding password to it. So we have to be careful that we're categorizing non-conformances and opportunities for improvement over time. All right, so that is our non-conformance. We look at the steps. Now, those are not my best practice for doing it. I'm just saying that if we're going to manage it, we create a culture of quality assurance, and it's everybody's responsibility. So the assessment officer, while doing your assessment duties, you're doing your quality checks. The admissions officer is doing a quality check there as well. And a part of improvement, we actually, yesterday, I sat down with one of my assessment officers, and we decided that when it's audit time, while we're surviving, we're not necessarily finding the evidence in a timely manner. And we got a non-conformance earlier this year, simply because 2 different individuals handling a process, and it was difficult for them to coordinate at the time of audit. And you're getting a non-conformance for something that you are actually doing correctly. The correction to that, the improvement point, was there is a final checklist that checks before you request certificates. You check to see, are the qualifications in place? Is there a contract for the assessor? All those things. And you do that quick check. And once you do that quick check, you know that this batch that you're certifying is audit ready. And that's what I mean when I talk about a culture of quality assurance, and not waiting until next week is assessment audit, I'm going to prepare for it. No, we build a culture. Each time you do a batch of students, you're looking at, are their qualifications intact? Does the assessor, is contract for the assessor in place? Did the RFA come in? And you can start gathering those and put them together, so that when it's time for audit, you're not trying to find out, oh, that wasn't done, that wasn't done. So we build a culture of coordinated quality assurance. A Plan, Do, Check, Act is one way we deal with it. And we have our team meeting or procedure. Let me show you once more what that procedure looks like. It is a part of your PPM. It's a part of your policy, that this is how you manage non-conformance. So if you look at what I have, for example, once an audit report comes, there is a way to deal with it. So it's not a random process. Someone is going to call a meeting. Someone is going to follow these procedures, and it tells you that you need to log the non-conformance, you need to work through it, and it tells you when it should be logged, and it is used to track the specific forms. And so there's a form there that tells you who it is assigned to, who did what, and so we can manage the cycle of non-conformance within the institutions. And the benefit of doing this is that we eventually have a system that's moving from one that is developing to be mature. And when it is mature, then we try to maintain the maturity of our quality system. And then we have what is now called Lean Six Sigma. In Lean Six Sigma, we're saying, okay, how do we make our processes more efficient? And that's where we need to get in TVET, where we are teaching, we're learning, and we start looking at, okay, we have a lesson plan problem. How do we address this lesson plan issue? We have an RFA issue. How do we fix that? We have an assessment challenge. How do we address that? And so over time, we can see where the process becomes a mature one. When it is very mature, then we attempt to optimize, meaning to make the process a better process. For example, when you have one PPM with everything inside of it, each time you go up for accreditation, you're changing the PPM and it's not reflected. Somewhere along the line, you get in trouble for that. Process improvement, we separate PPM from individual policies. So the PPM I have is 28 pages. PPM says for assessment, see assessment policy document. That is a separate document and we manage that document by itself. So we can change our assessment policy without having to change the PPM. We can change admissions policy without having to change the PPM. So that creates a collection, a system of policies and procedures where changing one doesn't always mean a change in all the document. And that was one of the way we got rid of the documentation challenge. Every audit, it was coming back. And through management review, you realize, how do you make this process efficient? And to the point now, as an institution, you know, you look at audit, you don't worry when auditors come because you can defend what you have built, what you've developed. And so that, ladies and gentlemen, is my 40 minutes presentation on the management of non-conformances in the TVET system. We are now open to a few questions if you may have any. So if there are any questions on the floor, please state your questions and we'll see how best we can. Or if you have something to say as it relates to what you heard, the floor is open. Feel free to share.
Mr. Gardner posted a question in the chat.
Oh, you posted a question. So your
Somewhat.
question is, are you saying that during the process of writing SOPs, management should also create, well, I'm not going to say that an institution must do it, but it is an excellent posture because continuing development, Sir Jerome, is important in TVET. And since we are always going to have non-conformances from time to time, we would want to have a structured way to deal with that. And the only way to have a structured way to deal with it is to have a policy that allows for you to deal with that. Otherwise, it becomes a person-centric situation where it depends on who knows how to do it. They may or may not do it, as opposed to have an institutionalized approach to dealing with the quality assurance issue. I'm not sure if that was a sufficient answer.
Yes, it does, because right now, based on where TVET is at, and based on the fact that you said it's a good practice, a best practice to have a policy, right, that governs or manages non-conformance. You know, TVET is always changing based on what workforce invents. So TVET adjusts itself and or do some modification to suit training needs and to suit workforce needs. So it means that, as you said, non-conformance will always be happening, and as such, you have to continuously improve and put policies in place to monitor and eliminate that part of it, right? So I'm glad you made that clear though. Thank you.
Right. It's very important, that we are able to do that than to leave it to the mercy of, who knows how to do it. I'm just going to show you quickly another strategy in dealing with non-conformances, because oftentimes we have persons saying, I didn't know I was to do this. I didn't know that this was a part of it. And then on the day of audit, when you're auditing an institution, they're saying to you, we needed to keep that. How do we know what record we need to keep? Now, in writing a policy, for example, this is one that's going under review. As you see, the track changes. What we write inside of policies, if the policy utilizes specific forms, it is very important that we list the forms that comes as part of this policy. So when one takes up this policy, you know what are the reference documents that this specific policy goes after, right? And at the end of all of these policies, you have the history, right? See the history? So one can take it up and can tell what happened to this document. How did it get here? Why did we make this change? And so you can see the history of the document within the document itself. Now, next thing you can see is compliance and maintenance procedures. Now, every single policy that I write, I put a section in it that tells how you maintain the policy, right? Notice this one is saying at least once per year, the quality assurance officer of the institution must carry out an audit. Now, this has nothing to do with external accreditation audit. We are saying before they come, you go do an exhaustive check and make sure that what record needed to keep in place. I think I'm showing you the compliance, sorry. How do we comply? But this section here is the records management, right? It talks about how do you manage the records that are produced by using this policy. So if you do requests for assessment, is there a policy that says you must file them alphabetically, or it's up to whoever thinks they should be filed? Did the policy says that record keeping is a part of a policy? Now, every policy I design must tell record management and how you go about doing the record management for that specific policy, and how do you comply and maintain these procedures. So that is a little addition in dealing with non-conformances. We ensure that the systems that we put in place is robust enough to handle the challenges that may come. There any question, any comment? So I see your comment, Elaine, right? Very informative presentation, quite insightful. Thank you for that. All right, so since there are no questions, I think we would have exhausted our lunch hour, and we did well in keeping the presentation in the specific time window. And we will be posting this video a little later on our YouTube channel. Now, also next week at 12 o'clock, our presenter will be Dr. Janet Dyer, and her presentation next week will be Reimagining TVET for Sustainable Economic Growth. That is where we're looking at, are we practicing TVET to meet the new industrial revolution? In some aspect of our programs, we are indeed practicing TVET 4.0. We're preparing students to work in the workforce that doesn't exist anymore, and so it always requires training. So her presentation will be a very insightful and interesting presentation on how do we transform our learning and our teaching and our general TVET instructions and TVET operations to meet the demand of TVET 4.0 with computer automated systems and hotels that, Mr. Murdoch, when you train hotel front desk agents now. They're not really there to check in anybody because persons are checking in themselves. So they may have to assist the customer now with the use of the kiosk and not necessarily be checking
My
in and asking for credit card and all those things. That's of the past. In TVET 5.0, we should be teaching persons not to be doing, nobody does a construction drawing in 2022 anymore. You use building information system where you're fitting in carpet, tile, everything in a computerized system. So people now want to see what the entire house looks like when it is finished. And that is TVET 5.0. Are we transitioning to that to ensure that our system of teaching and learning remains relevant in preparing students for the workforce of the future? So ladies and gentlemen, I do invite you next week for that presentation. The last one we're having in August will be on teaching strategies for adults, and we're looking at some unconventional teaching strategies. We have talked about pedagogy, andragogy. In that presentation, Mr. Marsh will lead us through what is called utagogy to look at how do we deal with self-directed learners in a traditional system. We learned about the VARC principles, visual learners, oral learners, kinesthetic learners. Now we'll be breaking into 6 learning styles and not 4 learning styles, because indeed now we have a learning style called social learner. This person only learns when the classroom is, they can't learn by themselves. They need others and they need social activities. Then we have what we call a learner that can only learn by themselves. They don't want to hear anybody. They need to be by themselves. And so in that presentation, Mr. Marsh will walk us through how we look at teaching adults who have these complexities and these different learning styles. So until next week at 12, same link, we'll be back with Dr. Janet Dyer on transforming TVET for sustainable economic growth. Until next week, have yourselves a quality assured week. All right? So see you guys next week, same time. Invite a friend.